Thank you for the lovely introduction and for all your time today. The first thing I'll say is I want to take a storytelling approach to describe this poster. So let's start with the objective or the problem setting. Overwhelmingly, 1.7 million people are affected by concussion each year. And this not only affects patients, but also their loved ones, friends, and family. On top of the sheer volume of concussions, victims have poor clinical outcomes and ineffective assessments of their injury. This is because current diagnostic tools are subjective and based on patient self-evaluations or questionnaires, and clinical opinions as well. The problem with all this subjectivity is it offers a poor understanding of the injury itself. And final assessments are a binary, you may have a concussion or you may not have a concussion. This does not provide a comprehensive assessment of injury. Therefore, a new robust technique is required. To provide some background for a new and exciting concussion assessment approach, we need to understand two key concepts: magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, and machine learning. MRI is a form of neuroimaging which collects brain data with high clinical relevancy. More importantly, since physiological data is measured, MRI provides a completely objective source of data collection. With clinically validated advanced MRI methods, we can investigate microstructural and functional integrity of the brain. Another important piece is machine learning, which is a form of high-level computing which allows for the identification of patterns in data. When implementing a large number of neuroimaging data sets into a machine learning pipeline, subtle abnormalities or outliers can be detected, such as a minor concussion on an MRI. It is also important to understand the specific implementation of the technology or the methodology. First, with MRI, there are two types of techniques or sequences that collect physiological data. They are all currently used clinically, and they include diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI, which measures microstructural integrity in the brain, and functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, which provides an assessment on the brain's functional integrity. Machine learning then comes into play when establishing the healthy baseline. When evaluating someone who's had a concussion, the first thing we need to know is ground truth. What is healthy? Current techniques attempt to answer this question by performing baseline testing, i.e., collecting data on an individual before their injury. However, this is not very effective as it suffers from tremendous subjectivity, and baseline tests are scarce unless you're a high-level athlete. That is why machine learning is used on MRI datasets of over 10,000 healthy control brains between the ages of 15 and 70. This large volume of healthy controls allows us to establish a healthy reference for each age and sex. Therefore, when someone presents with a concussion, we compare them to their expected healthy control group and identify if an injury exists using a machine learning outlier detection Z-score method. If an individual is identified to have a high Z-score, it's considered an outlier, meaning an abnormality is present and they are suffering from a concussion. So let's see this method in action. Let's look at some results. It's first important to note that given the blend of MRI and machine learning, for the first time, we can provide spatial and injury severity information. This enables better rehabilitation timelines and more focused treatments. 31 concussion patients have been evaluated so far with this technique, and working with local healthcare professionals, this method has been validated to have a positive clinical impact. Identifying injured brain regions has helped clinicians understand the overlap of symptom presentation, and they have articulated a significant improvement in patient mental health because neuroimaging proves the existence of their injury. Unfortunately, some of the results are currently protected by patient confidentiality. However, an example of the spatial and injury severity outlook is depicted in the brain image in the results section. To conclude, this technique can finally provide concussion patients with a more appropriate diagnosis and lead to improved clinical outcomes. The comprehensive injury information can also equip clinicians to make more data-driven decisions for treatment and rehabilitation. The machine learning technique also has tremendous room for growth, as it can potentially be applied to other neurological diseases, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, MS, and many more. Because the power of this technique lies within the large healthy control dataset, defining what is healthy. All in all, it is important that we keep making strides to blend machine learning with expert clinicians to truly make a difference for those suffering from the debilitating disease known as concussion. Thank you for the time, everyone, and I look forward to your questions.
Dr. Gorvet, if you have any questions, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Nick. That was a really interesting poster and presentation. I have two questions, and they might be a little bit more philosophical than really scientific.
Oh, I believe you went on mute there. Sorry.
Sorry. Thank you. Yes,
No,
I'm talking
worries.
to myself. Thank you. I was saying it was a really interesting presentation, and the poster was neat too. So I have two questions, and one of them is around the database. You must have heard, and I'm sure you know, there's a lot of question around database, and you say you have 10,000 people, age and sex is comprehended in there, but how can you make sure that there's no bias into some of the data that you have that really looks at all of that, you have enough of each set to actually define that baseline, because that would be key. And the second part is it's great to combine machine learning and MRI, but it's really hard to get access to MRI, even for something that is more complicated than a concussion. So how can we, what do you, how accessible is that technology eventually?
Right. Both tremendous questions that we always navigate, honestly, on a full-time basis when it comes to this type of research. To answer your first question, when it comes to that group of 10,000 healthy controls, one of the main mandates that we wanted to assess was reduce the amount of variability and try and inherently reduce the amount of bias. How we do that is we collect these 10,000 individuals from many different databases. We also include different MRI vendors. So there's the three big MRI vendors in the world, GE, Siemens, and Philips, which can sometimes induce some variability of their own because technically their MRI machines are slightly different. On top of that, we wanted to make sure to recruit patients from all over North America, South America, Europe, and Asia. Because as you can imagine, if you try and keep this a homogeneous, healthy group, you're going to have inherent bias in your machine learning results. So that's something we try and mitigate for. Additionally, I'll say as well, for each age and sex, our threshold from our power calculations, given the sensitivity of our measurements, is we need 88 individuals for each age and sex. So once we satisfy that requirement as well, we know that this healthy control group is representative of a normal healthy baseline, and we can compare those individuals to that distribution, basically. And when it comes to your second question with access, one of the main things we did want to do as well is we wanted to ensure that every MRI sequence, they're called, basically the MRI data acquisition protocols, which is the DTI and fMRI, we wanted to ensure that these are clinically useful and clinically valid because we need, it's not like we can use this novel MRI data acquisition technique. We need to ensure that it's translational across centers and sites and MRIs. So we made sure to select DTI and fMRI for that reason, in that these are clinically used techniques all over the world. So why I'm saying all this is you can take any MRI data that's been acquired anywhere over the world and you can funnel it into our pipeline and we can still run our results.
Thanks.
Dr. Bai, do you have any questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nicholas.
A question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So concussion can be classified into like a minor or mild or
Absolutely.
severe, right? So, and then as I mentioned, I get a project that really MRI is difficult to access because like cost and then availability, things like that. So is there any other rapid test that you could use to detect concussion or TBI on the onset without going into the deeper, like on severe or mild condition of this by using MRI and machine learning?
That's a great question. In a perfect world, I hope we find the answer to that. But currently, there are limitations in imaging in the sense that there are CT scans and MRI. CT scan is the one that's more affordable, more readily available, and it's a lower cost. It can also perform image scans within seconds compared to minutes for MRI. Problem with CT scans is they can only assess severe concussions where macrostructural damage and brain bleeding is present. So it's not sensitive to those milder forms. But to also give you some hope for the future, there are new magnets at 0.5 Tesla that are being built. And so when I say Tesla, it basically refers to magnet strength. A big issue with a 3 Tesla magnet, which is normally used in a clinic, is they're incredibly expensive. When it comes to a 0.5 Tesla, they're much more affordable and they can be used in trauma settings, and anyone can go into them. So that's actually one of the future ambitions of our research is we want to look into, can our big database translate to these 0.5 Tesla systems to make them a lot more accessible for future use.
All right, thank you, Nicholas.